Okay, let's just dive right into this. Have you ever noticed how the ultimate corporate comfort zone, and I mean the place where everyone just collectively breathes a sigh of relief, is the deadline, right? We celebrate when a project crosses the finish line right on time. We look at the calendar, we see that we hit the date, and we automatically assume, well, we assume that hitting that deadline is the ultimate proof of operational excellence. It feels great. We're on schedule, therefore we must be doing an amazing job. But in this explainer, we are going to challenge that exact assumption. We're going to look at why treating time as your primary measure of success is actually creating a massive, invisible blind spot in your operations.
Think about this for a second. You can hit every deadline and still be falling behind. Honestly, that realization kind of completely strips away the false comfort of being punctual, doesn't it? It introduces a core paradox that, frankly, most organizations are completely ignoring right now. You see, an entire department or even a whole company can look incredibly disciplined simply because they never miss a date. But right under the surface, they are quietly becoming obsolete. They are perfectly punctual, but they are absolutely losing their competitive edge. So how is that even possible? The reason why is that a deadline is simply a measure of time. That's all it is. It's a date on a calendar that asks one very basic question: did we finish this activity before the clock ran out? But lag measures a relevance gap. And this is the foundational intellectual distinction we need to make today. Time compliance is fundamentally different from strategic relevance. You can literally be 100% time compliant, hitting every single Friday deliverable, while your strategic relevance is just slowly, quietly eroding away.
So what does that erosion actually look like in the real world? Well, it's called lag debt. It is the growing distance between how you operate today and how a world-class operator would operate today. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. The danger here isn't necessarily that your own internal standards are falling apart. You might be working just as hard as you did 5 years ago, using the exact same rock-solid processes that made you wildly successful back then. The real danger is that the external best current frontier is moving past you. The market out there has found a better, faster, or more efficient way to produce that exact same outcome, and you just haven't adopted it yet.
To put that into perspective, imagine two lines moving across time. One line is your current capability, how your team does things right now, today. The other line is the best current frontier. That's the absolute best, most cutting-edge reference method available in the market to get that exact same work done. If your current method just stays static, if you're just doing what you've always done, while the market's capabilities inevitably evolve and move upward, the distance between those two lines starts to widen. And that widening space, that is your accumulated lag debt. You aren't technically doing worse, but the rest of the world is absolutely doing better.
So, you might be wondering, what actually causes this gap to widen in the first place? Well, it doesn't happen all at once. It's caused by everyday organizational habits that act like invisible weights tied to your ankles. We're talking about holding onto old tools, relying on old sales methods, sticking to old procedures just because they're familiar. It's slowed decision loops and leaving teams completely untrained on new industry standards. But above all, it's driven by a will update later culture. You know the one. These things quietly stretch the relevance gap wider and wider without ever triggering an immediate alarm. Because technically, your process still works, so no one ever stops to actually fix it. Now, before we look at this strictly from a company level, we need to apply this to ourselves for a minute. I want you to ask yourself, am I delivering outcomes or am I just doing tasks? This is about your own personal lag debt. I really challenge you to think about whether you are continuously upgrading your skill to outcome delivery, or if you are, frankly, just coasting on what you knew a few years ago. Are you faster and cleaner at your job than you were last year, or are you just a year older? If you aren't actively seeking out the current best way to produce the results your role demands, your personal relevance gap is widening too.
Of course, the standard corporate defense mechanism to all of this, the immediate knee-jerk reaction, is simply to say, we just need to work harder. But here's the reality check. Deadlines can be met by heroics. Lag can't. When your tools and your methods fall behind the market, your team has to expend extreme amounts of effort just to save a date. You pull the all-nighters, you skip crucial steps, you rely on the sheer willpower of a few dedicated employees to drag the project across the finish line. But extreme effort cannot fix a structural capability problem. Working harder simply doesn't modernize an outdated system.
And when you rely on those heroics instead of actual structural upgrades, the pain eventually becomes highly visible. You can't hide it forever. Lag shows up as requiring way more effort just to achieve the exact same result you used to get easily. It shows up as slower production cycles, a steadily rising number of mistakes, and a whole lot of people constantly saying, "I'm so busy," while the actual output visibly decreases. These are the inevitable, painful symptoms that surface when team heroics finally fail to mask an operational system that is fundamentally out of date. The friction just becomes completely undeniable.
And yet, despite all that visible friction, all those late nights and mounting errors, the stark truth is that companies hide lag the exact same way they hide dust. They sweep it right under the carpet. They actively normalize this decline. Instead of actually mapping out the gap and fixing it, the organization brushes off the structural lag with familiar excuses. You'll hear things like, well, this is just how we do it here. Or, it's way too complicated to change all that right now. Or, the absolute classic, we'll definitely fix it next quarter. And just like that, the lag gets culturally accepted as normal.
But you can only hide it for so long. Ignored structural lag eventually transforms from a series of minor annoyances into very expensive invoices. And what do I mean by that? I mean that slow processes inevitably increase project failure. Outdated methods lead to a spike in customer churn. Weak standards mean you are constantly doing rework, and untrained teams guarantee an increase in outright costly errors. At this point, the relevance gap stops being some theoretical, abstract concept we talk about in a meeting, and it starts creating serious economic consequences. It literally becomes a bill you have to pay.
Which brings us to a severe forcing function, the negative price guarantee, or what we call -1. Now, this isn't just some clever marketing gimmick to get attention. It's a standard that says, when our value goes missing, our price goes negative. On us. We pay the penalty. What -1 does is attach a very real, very painful financial consequence to missing value. It forces an entire organization to stop treating its operational misses as minor annoyances. By attaching a literal penalty, it makes that accumulated lag incredibly hard to hide from.
But here is a critical clarification, and we need to be very clear about this. -1 doesn't create excellence. It enforces the conditions for it. The guarantee itself doesn't magically jump in and upgrade your software or train your team for you. What it does is kill the hiding. It forces the internal system to actually measure its capability under genuine economic pressure. It forces defined outcomes, mapped workflows, and absolute proof of delivery. Essentially, it corners the organization into facing its lag debt head-on, before that debt becomes culturally permanent.
So once the hiding finally stops, how do you actually go about closing that gap? Well, you have to completely shift your mindset. A reference company trains like excellence is its actual job. A serious organization isn't just a place where people show up, grab a coffee, do work, and hit a few deadlines. It operates as a reference point for excellence in its industry. They actively work to close the relevance gap every single day rather than just going through the daily motions. They manage their capability, not just their calendar. And how does a reference company actually pull this off in practice? They do it through a continuous capability upgrade loop. They don't just rely on random bursts of inspiration or a once-a-year training seminar. They meticulously map their workflows to find those hidden inefficiencies. They explicitly train to close real skill gaps. They constantly upgrade their standards against the absolute best current frontier out in the market. They measure those improvements, and crucially, they document the upgrades so that the new, higher standard actually becomes the baseline. It is a continuous, mechanical loop of pushing their capability back up to the market's leading edge.
So bringing this entire logical argument full circle for you, tracking time is a dangerous illusion if the work you're delivering is no longer competitive. A deadline answers a very simple question: did we finish? But lag answers a much more terrifying question: are we obsolete? If you only manage deadlines and you ignore the widening relevance gap, you will eventually find yourself flawlessly delivering completely outdated work exactly on schedule.
Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought to take away from this explainer today. Deadlines tell you whether you were late. Lag tells you whether you are becoming irrelevant. The next time your team cheers and celebrates hitting a project date, I want you to take a step back and ask the much harder question. Are we just on time? Are we actually staying current? Because if you aren't actively closing your lag debt, you are quietly falling behind.